I think these politics are easy because who's going to believe a school mom is a terrorist? I mean, honestly.
Well, I agree with you on that. When you put stuff out into the biosphere of the media that says, you better do something by January 15th or else. My response is somebody who was a journalist and has a master's degree in terrorism. So my response, as well as the whole DOJ, was, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Do not threaten us.
Where was the threat?
That was Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's general counsel, a former judge named Vance Day, calling parents targeted by Democrat officials, including the Biden regime DOJ, terrorist. Yes, a Trump official calling concerned conservative parents terrorist. That doesn't give you any indication just to how far we've fallen. Vance Day accused a group of parents led by Kelly Walker of threatening the DOJ simply for this email from December 23rd. It was sent to multiple DOJ officials with the subject line, quote, "Parents demand action from this administration by January 15th. Now, I read the email, and it's a desperate plea for the DOJ to do its job and to keep Trump's promise of accountability for the weaponization enacted by the former regime. But it appears the Trump DOJ is more at war with the parents than the actual corrupt officials who weaponize government against them. In another letter I obtained from a parent targeted in Pennsylvania, the parent describes how Blanche's office, primarily Vance Day and another official named Ketan Birud, interviewed and prevented Ed Martin, who is soon to depart the DOJ, and has just been revealed, which I confirmed on Friday. I just hadn't let the cat out of the bag yet, out of respect for Mr. Martin. But that Ed has been removed for some time now from leading up the weaponization committee. Essentially, he's no longer weaponization czar and hasn't been since the end of last year. Well, apparently Day and his colleague stopped an investigation into the situation with this particular parent less than a month after Mr. Martin had opened his investigation. The parent writes that the investigation initiated by the weaponization working group has since stalled, and neither Mr. Vance Day nor anyone else in the Department of Justice will explain why that's happened, except they blame the parent for being, quote unquote, too persistent and not asking nicely enough. In fact, the parent explains that he has gotten 2 warnings from someone who has met with Vance Day in D.C. the week of 1/19, that it would be a quote unquote mistake for him to publicize this, and that the parent would quote unquote suffer the consequences if they chose to do so. Now, the parent told me he's not clear what that means, but he took it as a threat, which is the way it sounds to me. I think it was intended as much. He's still hoping the DOJ will do the right thing, so he's not exactly going public yet. Someone who is Kelly Walker. He's our friend from FreedomTalk Magazine that you just saw the commercial for. He's also heading up a group that tries to help parents who were targeted by the Biden regime. And Kelly joins us now. Kelly, this is a hard decision to make. This is kind of going scorched earth, but I have talked to many of the other parents as well, some who are not quite there with going on the record, but they are very frustrated because they say the DOJ has no plan to adhere to any of the promises that the president made about accountability.
Yeah, that's true. And we have a number of parents that Sam Sorbo, Seek Smith, Alex Newman, and I and others have been trying to help. We formed the Parents Demanding Justice Alliance, which you can find a page on realfreedomtalk.com. And we've seen reactions from parents ranging from suicide, despondency, hopelessness, to this parent who I think did things a little differently than me. But as I explained to Vance, a lot of these parents have PTSD. They may, be very angry. They might say words that, out of anger, but none of them have threatened anybody. None of these people are terrorists. And I take a real affront to that word even being mentioned within the DOJ. I think Vance Day is trying to do his job. I think he is trying to find some things out, but we also have been stalled. Promises have been broken. Pam Bondi was supposed to have a hearing with the parents on October 15th, I believe it was, but that got canceled indefinitely. We got no renewal date for that. And then Pam Bondi stood up in the Senate hearing and testified to the Senate that the problem's been taken care of, as if rescinding the Garland memo from October 4th of 2021 was going to fix everything. And we've been consistently reporting. Sam and I and others have been to DC multiple times. We've been saying, look, this is urgent. We have parents who are still being arrested, still being persecuted, children being called Nazis. And if anything, the lack of action has made it worse on these parents. So there is a desperation, and we've been put off. And we were told during the shutdown that, well, they just didn't have the manpower. Well, they managed to pardon George Santos. They managed to stand up with Benny Johnson when his family was being threatened. But my family's been threatened for 5 years. A lot of these families have been threatened. Some of them have had those threats acted upon. They've had time to be working on a documentary, which I previewed in Vance's office, which to me, fine and good, but it's a gloss. Because starting in July 16th, when we held a press conference sponsored by Andy Ogles, Representatives Andy Ogles and Andy Biggs, on the Hill in the Triangle, we were told, Ed Martin had said he intended to attend. He didn't. We were told that Ed Martin had prevented him. And the trail has been, that Todd Blanche had prevented him. The trail is very, very clear. I've documented it all, that Todd Blanche has been blocking this. So I knew about Ed Martin getting the axe almost 2 weeks ago, and I was watching it, expecting it to happen. I've met with Ed Martin twice. He's always been up front. In fact, with this parent, we pushed really hard, and Ed Martin wrote a letter confirming that the DOJ was culpable. It's exactly, it reflects the wording in two of President Trump's executive orders in a directive memo from Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi and Harmeet Dillon both have gone on X saying we support these parents. We're not going to tolerate this, and yet nothing's been done. They've been put off for months and months and months. And, this parent, his is not even the worst case, but it's still serious. And, he's fit to be tied. His family's in anxiety. People have lost family relationships, been socially stigmatized. My own family, I was probably target number one, the record shows. And they took everything from our family. And to sit there in Vance Day's office as a Representative Blanche and hear those words, but also hear that, eventually we'll have this hearing with Bondi, but we need people who are squeaky clean up there. And Kelly, because of your record, you can't be up there. I took an affront to that, and I said, look, parents who've been arrested, maybe have warrants for their arrest, all sorts of things, that's a badge of honor. That means they stood up for their country. They took the hits when President Trump was not in office. They held the line until President Trump got in office, and they need to be honored, and it should have been done already. Everybody, every show I've gone on, all the names, they've said, this is a slam dunk for President Trump. Why hasn't this been done yet? And I challenge President Trump to honor these parents. I challenge President Trump to provide some real restitution for these parents. I was told point blank in Vance's office, he said, what do you want? I said, I want these people's lives back, including our own. He said, don't expect that. And he basically said, don't expect any justice from DOJ. He said, you can sue if you want to. What kind of response is that?
Well,
and we saw what happened. Yeah, go ahead.
We saw what's happened with the J6ers, right? Who many of them have now done lawsuits for restitution, for the targeting, the weaponization against them, right, by the Biden regime, and the current DOJ is fighting them against this. So Vance Day can sue all day long, but all indications are that they would fight you on this anyway, right? Because they are the J6ers. I just want to say that the other parent, was very clear that he never once protested outside of a government building. He hasn't burned anything down like the people in Minneapolis, right? Or the George Floyd riots, the Summer of Love in DC, which I saw firsthand. He hasn't assaulted an officer or government official, destroyed property, or so much as cursed at anyone at DOJ while I waited for more than a year for them to simply enforce the law. Yet Vance Day, Todd Blanche, and their colleagues at DOJ consider people like me to be terrorists, he added to me.
And he's just
what I voted for.
He's probably one of 60 parents that Sam and I have put in a dossier, which you can find on freedomtalk.com. This is the redacted version. Some people said, absolutely keep my names in there. But there are all kinds of people out there who are fighting this battle, and they're not getting help. They're being ignored.
No.
And we've been very, very clear with the DOJ and the White House, for that matter. Hey, we've had parents that have committed suicide. And for Pam Bondi to go up, it makes me wonder, has Todd Blanche misinformed her, or what's going on there? For her to stand up and say this problem has been taken care of, it's quite the opposite. So I've been in the position of having many, many parents texting me day and night, calling me, asking for help, even on my family time, and then having to reach out and say, hey, DOJ, President Trump, if you don't do something about this, you're going to have angry parents showing up. That's not a threat. That's a reality. And in fact, Sam and I and others have been kind of trying to get these parents to say, just wait, let them do something. We can't wait any longer. And what I was told in the DOJ when I went there on Friday the 23rd was, maybe we'll have a hearing in about 5 months when school opens, so we have a press talking point, and we need to get squeaky clean people up there. And I had just told this gentleman that I have a record, and he said very specifically, because of the record that I have and what I'm facing, that the strong inference was, you're not going to be up there, Kelly. Look, we don't need sanitized versions of things. We need sunlight. And in point of fact, the DOJ under Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco, they're guilty of this. All you have to do is go to realfreedomtalk.com. We've got it all there. You can read the report by the Committee on the Judiciary led by Jim Jordan. You can read the Americans for Liberty report, which says it's the smoking gun that Merrick Garland did all of these things. He didn't have a federal hook. The DOJ attorney said you don't have a constitutional right to go up to these parents. So what did he do? Little jurisdictional sleight of hand. He started working with the states. There's evidence that he drafted the National School Board Association memo that then got sent to him, and Biden as justification for putting federal terrorist resources on parents. This is a national shame.
Well, that's why that really burned me up to hear Vance Day say, well, that's like, you're terrorists. We don't negotiate with terrorists, suggesting that you, for that email, and the people that you were representing are terrorists because they want accountability. They made me so mad. I'm gonna put the rest of the conversation. I only did that snippet on X. I'll put the rest of the conversation because it didn't get any better along the way. I didn't appreciate the way he talked to you with everything you've been through. Real quick, you can find us at Freedom Talk Magazine, and we're running out of time, but I know, like you said, the parents held the line. They made all the difference in 2021 here in my state of Virginia, right? And Glenn Youngkin's election. So how do people support you all, Kelly?
Please go to realfreedomtalk.com. Go to that Parents Demanding Justice Alliance page. Donate. Okay. It's a 501c3. Thanks to Sam Sorbo. And one of the most egregious things is the DOJ is trying to push this back on the states, when clearly, even in the EOs, it says the federal government weaponized against the American people, and Todd Blanche is trying to protect the DOJ and get out of that. There's a lot of questions to be asked, and I have much more to say on this.
And we'll have you back to say that. There's lots of questions to be asked. We hope that someone will start asking the questions. Thank you so much, Kelly Walker. It's good to see you. Thank you for sharing this. I know I admire your bravery, because I know this is also going to make you a target, Kelly, but we appreciate your courage. Thanks for joining us.
All we want is to get these parents' lives back that were stolen from them, so they can enjoy the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness they're entitled to.
I agree. That's what we all want. Thanks, Kelly. That's why we're covering this. Thank you, Kelly.